So in this video we're going to look at a number of different groups of these phrasal verbs, 7 in total. We're going to look at them, we're going to look at the different meanings. So we have 7 different meanings of what down means when we see it in a phrasal verb. We're going to go through these group by group. And at the end of the video you're going to understand the logic behind the phrasal verbs. So we're going to get into it right now, start looking at these phrasal verbs. The first group we're going to look at is the most basic group. The meaning is just a downward direction, okay? You have something in your hand and then you do this, you put it down. So here, really down, it's not dramatically changing the meaning of put, but it's just giving you more information about the direction. For example, you could put something up on a shelf. In this case, I'm putting something down, okay? So it's to stop holding it. So for example, somebody could be reading a book, could say, I love this book, I can't put it down. Okay, so again, we know to put down means to stop holding something. In this case, this is kind of where this phrasal verb put down moves into a kind of an idiomatic expression. So if you say I can't put it down about a book, the meaning is I can't stop reading it. We'll do one more example in this first group. So the first group of phrasal verbs with down is the ones where we're talking about a downward direction. So a common phrase you could hear when you're talking about flying would be to touch down. For example, we could say the plane touched down 10 minutes early. Okay, so the meaning is the plane landed 10 minutes early. The second meaning of down when we see it in phrasal verbs is another basic meaning. It's connected with this downward movement. It's the idea of resting. So basically it's the opposite of standing in most cases. So if somebody looks tired and you want them to take a seat, the way you can say this is please sit down. Okay, or if you're tired, sit down. Okay, so to sit down means to stop standing. For example, he was tired, so he decided to sit down for a few minutes. Okay, so to sit down, it's the opposite of stand up. Another phrasal verb, again, basically in opposition to standing up, would be to lie down. Okay, so to lie down is more for when you're going to sleep, when you're going to bed, you will lie down. The meaning of lie, it's not dramatically changing because of the preposition. There's a slight change in the meaning, but essentially it's just describing the direction, so a downward movement. So you're first standing and then you lie down. So it's a description of the movement. For example, we could say he was exhausted, so he lay down to take a nap. Okay, so he lay down to sleep for a few minutes. So that's it. That's the first 2 groups of phrasal verbs with the preposition down. So these ones are pretty easy, I think. So we're basically just talking about a downward movement. So the phrasal verb here, the preposition, is giving us an idea of the direction, but it's not changing the meaning of the verb in a huge way. So we could even debate about whether you would consider these to be phrasal verbs. In some sense, it's just a verb and a preposition, and the preposition is explaining the direction of the verb. So we'll put these as the first 2 groups of phrasal verbs with down, but as we progress, we will look at some more phrasal verbs where the meaning is changed more. So the verb, as with all of the phrasal verbs, the verb isn't going to give us the meaning of the phrasal verb, it will be the preposition that we're studying. So we're looking at phrasal verbs with the preposition down. So we've already looked at 2 groups with the more basic meanings of the preposition down. We're going to look at group number 3 now. So these are phrasal verbs where the preposition down has a similar meaning. So the first ones we were talking about a direction, a downward movement. This group, the preposition down, is to signify a reduction. The first of these phrasal verbs is probably one of the most useful phrasal verbs you're going to learn in English. When you're speaking to somebody and they're speaking too fast, you could ask them to slow down. Okay, so to slow down, you're asking the person to reduce the speed at which they're speaking. So you could say, can you please slow down? I can't understand you. You're speaking too fast. Okay, so sometimes my students will say this to me if I'm teaching, and maybe if I drink too much coffee, I'll be speaking very, very fast, and the students will say, Rob, please slow down. So slow down means to speak more slowly. Okay, so it can be for speaking, but it can be for any other activity. So if you're in the car with somebody and they're driving very fast, you could say, slow down, you're driving too fast. Okay, so it means reduce the speed. An example would be, the teacher was speaking too fast, so I asked her to slow down. Okay, so this is a useful one for you to use when you're learning English. Another phrasal verb in this group is to calm down. Okay, so this phrasal verb is very common. You'll hear people use it all the time. To calm down, the meaning is to become more calm. So we're talking about a reduction, but the reduction here is a reduction of the stress. So in English, when we're talking about stress, we'll often use the preposition up. We'll say that somebody is wound up, they're uptight. People will say, I'm up to here, or I've had it up to here, to mean that they're stressed about something. So when we want to relax, we say calm down. So to calm down is to become more relaxed. An example we could say would be that meditation helps me to calm down after a busy day. So meditation helps me to relax after a busy day. So calm down, this is a phrasal verb you're going to hear a lot in English. Okay, so if somebody is getting very angry, very agitated, very stressed, you could say, oh, calm down. A third phrasal verb that we can put into this group of phrasal verbs where down means a reduction, is to settle down. Okay, settle down, the meaning is to stay in one place. It's often used to talk about moving into a home where you're going to live, usually with a family, that kind of thing. So this is what it means to settle down. Maybe not travel so much, to not go out so much, to spend more time at home, more time with your family. Maybe get married and decide to settle down. Then go down, the meaning is again reduction. So we would often use this when we're looking at statistics. So we could say the price of something was first increasing, so going up, and then decreasing, so going down. So we could say, for example, the price of gold has gone down in the last few weeks. So the meaning here is that the price has decreased in this time. This is the third group of phrasal verbs with the preposition down. The meaning is a reduction. We've got three meanings now. The first one was just a simple downward movement. The second one again was quite simple, so going into a resting position, so sitting down, lying down, these kind of things. And then the third one is to talk about a reduction. Okay, so we've looked at three meanings of down when we see this preposition in a phrasal verb. We're going to look at two more now. So meaning number 4 is when we're talking about writing. Okay, so the reason we use the preposition down when we're talking about writing is because this is the direction that we look when we're writing. So if you have to write something, you'll look down. When, for example, your teacher is speaking, the teacher is explaining something, the teacher might ask you to write something down. Okay, so to write it down means to make a note of it. Okay, so to write it on a piece of paper in your notebook. There's different verbs that the teacher might use. If they want you to write something very quickly, they could ask you to jot it down. So to jot down means to write quickly, not so carefully. So this could also be used if you're working, maybe taking an order on the phone and you're writing quickly, so you're jotting it down. Okay, so the preposition down can be used for when you're talking about writing. Another phrasal verb that would have a very similar meaning would be to note down. So to note something down is to write it on a piece of paper. So we could say to note down, to jot down. You could say to take something down. Take something down again is to write something on paper. When we say take down or write down, there's a meaning of being a little bit more careful. When you say to note down or jot down, the idea is to write something shorter, more quickly. This is a small group of phrasal verbs, but it's important to know that when we use the preposition down, it's not changing the meaning of the verb in a big way, but the idea is that you're describing the way the person is looking. For example, the opposite would be if I as a teacher write something on the whiteboard, I would be writing it up on the whiteboard and the students will be writing it down in their notebook. So we're just giving a little bit more information by using the phrasal verb. Another important little group of phrasal verbs with the preposition down is for when we're talking about the rain. Okay, so in Ireland, this is very important. We talk about the weather a lot and we talk about the rain a lot. So the direction again of the rain is this downward movement. So because of this, often when we're talking about the rain, when we're using verbs to describe the rain, the preposition that we'll use in the phrasal verb will be with down. Okay, so again, with all of these phrasal verbs so far, the meaning of the verb is not changing in a big way, but the preposition down gives us a little bit more information. So for example, we could say that it is pouring down. This means that it's raining very heavily. Another way we could say it's raining heavily is that it's lashing down. So we could say pouring down, lashing down. We could say, for example, that the rain is really coming down. Okay, so to say that the rain is coming down means that it's raining heavily. Okay, we could say lashing down, coming down, pouring down. If we want to really express that it's raining very heavily, a lot of rain at one time, we could say that it's bucketing down. Okay, so this is to express that it's raining very heavily. Okay, so these are 4 phrasal verbs that we can use to talk about very heavy rain, which unfortunately is quite common in Ireland. So we've looked at 5 groups so far of phrasal verbs with the preposition down. So far these have all had this same linked idea of a downward direction. When we're just talking about downward movement, we're talking about going into a resting position, we're talking about a reduction, we could be talking about the rain, the direction when we look, when we're writing something. All of these phrasal verbs we're using the preposition down. The next group is no different, so it's when we're talking about eating and drinking. Okay, so when we eat something, the food goes down, or when we drink something, the food goes down. So the first 3 that we'll look at are all about drinking in different ways. So the first one is to gulp down. Okay, so to gulp down is when you drink something very quickly. So for example, I was doing a lot of exercise and then I gulped down a bottle of water. So to gulp down is to drink something very, very quickly. Okay, so if you're really thirsty, you'll gulp down a bottle of water. The opposite to gulp down would be to sip down. So if you sip something down, the idea is that you're drinking it more slowly, more carefully. So this would be maybe if you're drinking wine or if you're drinking whiskey or some drink like this where you want to really enjoy the flavor, you would sip it down. So slowly sip it down. Okay, so the meaning is to drink it more slowly. And the third one to talk about drinking would be to wash down. Okay, so this is normally when after we've eaten something, we will wash it down. I could say that after I'd eaten a delicious meal, I washed it down with a glass of wine. Okay, so the meaning is that after the meal, you have a drink to finish the meal. Okay, so you wash the food down. So these are 3 meanings where we're talking about drinking. And another one that can be talking about food or drink is to keep down. So to keep down food is what we'd often talk about if somebody was sick, if somebody was not well and they're vomiting. If somebody's vomiting, they're not keeping the food down. Okay, the opposite is to throw up. Okay, another phrasal verb, to vomit, is to throw up. So the opposite would be to keep down. Okay, so you could say, for example, he's having great difficulty keeping food down at the moment. Okay, he can't keep anything down at the moment. So the meaning is that he can't keep the food in his stomach. He's very sick. Okay, so we've looked at 6 groups now of phrasal verbs with the preposition down. We're going to look at one more group now. The first one we have in this group is to back down. This is normally when we're talking about when there's an argument or maybe there's some kind of debate. And first somebody has a very strong position, they're very confident in their position. But after time, they back down. Okay, so to back down in this case means to retreat from your position. So first you're strong, confident in your position, but after time you decide that you don't want to hold this position anymore, so you back down. Okay, so an example, we could say that she was very confident in the meeting, but after she heard everybody else's point of view, she decided to back down. Okay, so she decided that what she was pushing at first was not such a good idea, so she retreated and decided, I'm not going to push this idea. Then to step down would be when somebody retires or when somebody resigns. So, for example, we could say that he was the manager of the company for 10 years, but has now decided to step down. Okay? Often this is used in a situation where there's some kind of controversy. So you could say there was a big scandal in the company and the manager was forced to step down. Okay, so in this case she was told by the other people to resign from her position. So to step down, the meaning is you're in a good position and then you resign. Okay, so it's less of an obvious downward movement, but you've been working all the way up in your career and then you step down is when you resign from that position. When we talk about stepping down, it's not normally used for a low position in a company or even a middle position in a company. It's for somebody who gets to a high position and then for whatever reason they have to resign. So in this case, when somebody's at a top position and there's a downward motion, they stop being at the top, they're stepping down. A third phrasal verb that we can put into this category would be to break down. So it can be used in two different ways. One is when you're talking about emotion. So when somebody breaks down, it's when they look very confident and strong, but then they become very upset and they're crying and they're no longer looking strong. They look more vulnerable. In a case like this, you could say that the person broke down. I could say, for example, when I found out I lost my job, I completely broke down. Okay, so the meaning here would be that I got very upset, I started crying. All of these things would mean that I was breaking down. Another meaning of breakdown would be when you're talking about a car. So if you have a car and you're driving and then the engine in the car stops working, you could say the car is broken down. Okay, so you could say I was driving along the motorway and suddenly my car broke down. So the meaning would be my car stopped working. So in this case, you'd need to bring the car to a mechanic. A fourth phrasal verb in this group is to let down. So to let down means to disappoint. So an example would be, she didn't turn up to the meeting and let everybody down. Okay, so that would mean that we were all expecting that she was going to come to the meeting. It was important that she was coming to the meeting, and then she didn't come. So she let us down. She disappointed us. Okay, so to let somebody down is to disappoint them. And then the last two phrasal verbs that we can put into this group are to knock down or to tear down. We're going back to the original meaning now with knock down and tear down. We're talking about destroying a building. So, for example, the building was in terrible condition for years and they decided to knock it down, or they decided to tear it down. So the two phrasal verbs here have basically the same meaning. They mean to demolish or to destroy a building. So to knock down sounds a little bit more organized, and to tear down sounds a little bit more violent, that it came down more quickly. But the phrasal verbs basically mean the same thing, to demolish something. So that's it. We've looked at 7 different groups of phrasal verbs with the preposition down. As I always say, to understand the phrasal verb, you need to understand the preposition. So I think now, by looking at these 7 different meanings, you have a very strong understanding of what the preposition down means when you see a new phrasal verb. Of course, this will not cover all of the phrasal verbs with down. It's not a way that you can create new phrasal verbs with down. So now when you see new phrasal verbs or you hear people using phrasal verbs with the preposition down, it's going to be easier for you to understand what they mean.